Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
All right, so get this. You walk into a room, maybe it's with your team at work, maybe it's your community group, could even be your book club.
Yeah.
30 minutes later, you've got a stack of bold, game-changing ideas, all thanks to the magic of something called 2510 crowdsourcing. I'm excited to unpack this one. It's seriously cool.
What I find fascinating about 2510 is that it's part of this bigger movement called liberating structures.
Okay.
You can think of them as like recipes for better group interaction, getting people unstuck from those same old meeting ruts.
I love a good recipe, especially one for unlocking hidden potential.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to hand you the 2510 blueprint.
Okay.
Enough to actually try it out yourself.
And speaking of blueprints,
Okay.
the foundation of 2510 starts with this really insightful quote by Lily Tomlin.
Okay.
She said, "Reality is only a consensual hunch."
Okay, so at first glance, that might sound a bit out there, but think about how often we get stuck in a certain way of thinking as a group.
It's almost like we unintentionally create a shared reality based on assumptions and maybe even biases. And that can really limit our creativity.
Which is where 2510 comes in, ready to shake things up.
Right.
Instead of relying on outside experts or top-down directives, 2510 turns to the collective wisdom of the group itself.
The method is built on 5 key structural elements.
Yeah.
And I promise we won't get too academic here.
Okay.
To help you visualize this, let's imagine you're in a room with your colleagues. Everyone's standing up. There's energy in the air.
Gotcha.
You're given a challenge, something like think big, think bold. What's one idea that could 10x our business? That's the first element, the invitation.
So we've got this invigorating atmosphere, a bold challenge laid out.
Right.
What's next?
Next comes the space. Forget stuffy boardrooms. 2510 thrives in more informal settings where people can move around and interact freely.
Right.
This helps keep the energy levels high and creates a sense of openness and collaboration.
All right, so we've got the invitation, the right space, everyone's feeling the vibe.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, now it's all about participation, making sure everyone feels empowered to contribute their unique perspective. It's a level playing field where no one dominates and every voice is heard. And this is where it gets really interesting. The fourth element is groups.
So we're starting to see the dynamics of the crowd come into play.
Exactly. You'll shift between working solo to brainstorm your own bold ideas, pairing up to riff off each other, and then coming together as a whole group to share and discuss.
Okay.
This keeps the energy flowing and prevents any one dynamic from getting stale.
I can already see how this would prevent those moments where one person's idea dominates the conversation.
Right.
So on to the fifth and final element, the sequence.
Here's where things get tactile and almost game-like. Everyone writes their big idea on an index card, and then the magic happens. We start milling around, passing our cards to each other.
Wait, so my idea literally ends up in someone else's hands?
Yes. And that's crucial because it creates this rapid, unfiltered exchange of ideas. It also prevents people from getting too attached to their own ideas and allows for more objective evaluation.
That's fascinating. It sounds like a really clever way to break down those mental barriers we often put up.
Yeah.
So what happens after the card swap? Is that where the scoring comes in?
You got it.
Yeah.
There are 5 rounds of scoring, each round helping the group get closer to identifying those powerhouse ideas that have the most potential.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the brilliance of this milling and passing idea.
Yeah.
It's like a rapid-fire brainstorming session where everyone gets to contribute and build upon each other's ideas.
Exactly. And because the ideas are anonymous during those initial rounds,
Right.
it helps levels the playing field and allows for more honest feedback. You're not judging the person, just the idea itself.
Which is so important, right? And allows those quieter voices to be heard and those more out there ideas to surface without fear of judgment. So tell me more about the scoring system.
Okay.
How does it work?
Well, after each round of milling and passing, you take a look at the cards you're holding
Okay.
and give each one a score.
Gotcha.
This helps you sift through the ideas and start to identify the ones that resonate most with the group.
So it's not just about generating ideas, but also about refining and prioritizing them.
Precisely. And that's one of the things that makes 2510 so effective.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about brainstorming for brainstorming's sake.
Right.
It's about identifying those ideas that have the most potential and are most likely to be embraced by the group.
And because everyone's involved in the scoring process, it creates a sense of ownership and buy-in.
Yeah.
Which is crucial for actually implementing those ideas later on.
That's a great point. It's not just about generating ideas in a vacuum. It's about creating a shared understanding and commitment to action.
Okay, so I'm sold on the concept, but I'm sure there are some potential pitfalls or
Ah,
things to watch out for when using 2510.
you're right. No method is perfect. One thing to be mindful of is that the scoring can sometimes be a bit uneven. You might have someone who's a little too enthusiastic with their fives, or someone who's a bit more hesitant to give out high scores.
I can see how that could skew the results.
Yeah.
So how do you prevent that from happening?
Well, one way is to simply average the scores to even things out.
Okay,
You can also make sure to clearly explain the scoring criteria beforehand
gotcha.
and encourage people to be as objective as possible.
And I imagine choosing the right rating scale can also make a big difference.
Absolutely. A fun and engaging scale can make the whole process more enjoyable and help people get into the spirit of things.
Okay.
For example, instead of using a traditional 1 to 5 scale, you could try something like 1 equals not my cup of tea,
Uh-huh.
and 5 equals sends me over the moon.
I love that. It's clear, it's fun,
Yeah.
and it definitely injects a bit of personality into the process. Any other tips for making 2510 run smoothly?
Another important one is to take your time explaining the milling and passing part. Especially if you're working with a larger group, it can get a little chaotic.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure everyone understands how it works before you set them loose.
That makes sense. You don't want people reading the cards during the milling phase.
Right.
That would defeat the purpose of getting that rapid, unfiltered exchange of ideas.
Right. The goal is to keep the ideas moving and prevent anyone from overthinking or second-guessing themselves.
Mhm.
Another little trick is to use Post-it notes to cover the scores from previous rounds. This prevents people from being influenced by earlier ratings and ensures that each round of scoring is fresh and unbiased.
Okay, so we've covered the basics and some potential pitfalls,
Mm.
but I'm curious, how does 2510 connect to other methods or frameworks?
Okay.
Is it a standalone technique, or can it be integrated with other approaches?
That's what I love about 2510. It's incredibly versatile. You can use it as a standalone activity, or you can weave it into other group processes.
Mm.
For example, you could use it after an open space technology session, which is another liberating structure that allows for self-organized group discussions.
So it's like using 2510 to help prioritize and refine the ideas that emerged from those open discussions. I'm starting to see how this could be a powerful tool for any group looking to harness its collective creativity.
Exactly. You can also combine 2510 with something called an agreement certainty matrix, which helps you analyze ideas based on how much agreement and certainty there is within the group.
That sounds like a great way to go deeper and really understand the nuances of each idea.
Right. It helps you move beyond simple popularity and really identify those ideas that have both strong support and a high degree of confidence in their feasibility.
So we've talked about how 2510 can be integrated with other methods, but what about variations on the core process itself? Are there ways to adapt it to different needs or situations?
Absolutely. One of the things that make 2510 so powerful is that it can be easily tweaked to fit your specific needs. For example, instead of asking for bold ideas, you could ask, if you could unmake one decision that's holding us back, what would it be?
Wow, that's interesting. It shifts the focus from generating new ideas to critically examining existing ones.
Exactly. And by asking for the first step to unmaking that decision, you're already prompting people to think about action and implementation.
I can see how that would be really valuable for teams that are feeling stuck or need to break free from outdated ways of doing things.
Right. And you can also adapt 2510 to spark courageous conversations or focus on future possibilities.
Okay.
For instance, you could ask, what's one thing we need to start doing today to ensure our success 5 years from now?
I love how adaptable this technique is. It's like a Swiss Army knife for group dynamics. But
Yeah.
let's get practical here.
Okay.
Can you give me some concrete examples of how 2510 has been used effectively in the real world?
Of course. One example that really stands out is its use in unconferences. Imagine a room buzzing with energy people, bouncing ideas off each other, and then using 2510 to quickly distill that collective wisdom into a set of actionable priorities. It's incredibly powerful.
It sounds like a great way to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that the most valuable ideas rise to the top.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to large-scale events. You can use 2510 in task forces, meeting wrap-ups,
Okay.
or even as a closing activity to reinforce team bonds and generate shared commitment.
You know, one of the sources I read mentioned a really intriguing example about 2510 being used in physician education.
Yeah.
It didn't go into much detail, but it piqued my curiosity.
Yes, it's a fascinating case study that highlights the potential of 2510 to enhance professional development. Apparently, they used it to help medical professionals develop key competencies. which is remarkable.
It really makes you think about all the different ways this technique could be applied. It's not just about business or innovation, it's about tapping into collective intelligence in any field or setting.
That's the beauty of liberating structures, like 2510. They provide a framework for unleashing the collective wisdom that exists within any group.
It's like giving people the tools to liberate their own thinking and the thinking of those around them. And speaking of giving credit, it's important to acknowledge the brilliant minds behind 2510.
Absolutely. This method was developed by Henry Lipmanovich and Keith McCandless, two pioneers in the field of liberating structures. They were inspired by the work of improvisationalists, which explains the dynamic and playful nature of 2510.
It's amazing how a technique rooted in improvisation can have such a profound impact on group dynamics and decision-making. I'm really starting to see the possibilities here.
And that's why we want to leave you with a sense of possibility and empowerment. So here's a question for you to consider.
Okay.
If you could apply 2510 to any group you're part of, which one would it be and why?
That's a great question to ponder. It makes you think about all the different groups we're part of and how we could potentially unlock their hidden potential using this method.
And here's another one to spark your imagination picture. A workshop where all those bold ideas generated through 2510 are written on giant sticky notes and plastered all over the walls.
Wow.
What would that look like? What kind of energy and excitement would that generate?
I love that visual. A room like bursting with colorful sticky notes,
Yeah.
each one representing a bold idea, a potential breakthrough. It's like a tangible manifestation of the group's collective brain power.
And the best part is that those ideas wouldn't just be stuck on a wall. The whole purpose of 2510 is to identify the most promising ideas, those that can be turned into action and drive real change.
It's like you're creating a roadmap for innovation, a shared vision that everyone has contributed to and feels invested in.
Exactly. And because the process itself is so engaging and energizing, it helps create a sense of momentum and excitement around those ideas.
So whether you're trying to solve a complex problem, generate innovative solutions, or simply tap into the collective wisdom of a group 2510, crowdsourcing is definitely a tool you'll want to have in your arsenal.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the best solutions are right there in the room waiting to be unlocked. All we need are the right structures and the willingness to embrace a more liberating way of working together.
And on that note, we'll leave you to explore those possibilities. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those ideas flowing.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.